May, I rarely need a microphone. Welcome to the May meeting for the Internet Developer Group. This should be a very interesting meeting. Before we get started, I got one or two housekeeping notes I'd like to make. First of all, we have now exceeded 34,000 reviews of the archives for this group, so I think we're becoming fairly well identified. And my Webalizer will look at 40 countries, and we always exceed that in every month we go by. So we're being looked at from all over the world, which may be a scary thing. We're recording tonight's meeting, and as we do always, and it will be available within a matter of a few days up on the internet for streaming. We're probably going to standardize on streaming with real audio. I hope that meets with your approval. More different platforms seem to be able to handle that than almost any other kind of format, so that's where we'll go. It's my great pleasure to introduce Peter Thoeny tonight. Peter and I met a couple years ago when he was consulting for some work on the Twiki and some implementations of the Twiki into a kind of unique environment. He has over 15 years of software architecture and user interface development experience. Been working with web technology through that time. For the last 4 years, 4 years, is that right? 5 years.
5 years.
5 years, he's been the main author and collaborator for the Twiki, which grew out of the wiki, which some people may be familiar with, but the Twiki really has gone so far beyond the wiki, it's really a platform and system of its own right now. He currently keeps himself otherwise occupied at Wind River as the engineering manager, but I think his real love is in doing the open source Twiki, if I had to guess about that thing. and you'll be able to tell from his accent, he's Swiss, he was educated in Switzerland. Okay, Peter?
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Got our attention. Everybody's listening.
The boat is leaving Pier 32.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight, coming here. Probably there's still some pizza left. Help yourself. But probably Bill is watching out if you're...
No, go ahead.
That Bill is getting his $4. So. Okay. So tonight we will talk about web collaboration and Twiki in particular. So we are going now into a presentation, and this presentation is not PowerPoint like usually. It's a presentation done in the Twiki tool. So we will see later on how that works. We have a fairly large number of slides, so I will go through quite quickly. Please feel free just to ask questions in between, that's fine. And so the agenda tonight is basically just look first in general what kind of challenges do we have in a distributed environment for intranets and also for content management systems. Then look a little bit what knowledge means, what wiki is, then we start to look at Twiki, and then go into the highlights, some limitations, how we can learn about the technology, then look at more some advanced features in web applications, and then some thoughts on initial deployment in case you're interested to start yourself, some collaboration issues you should be aware of when you're using a tool like Twiki, and then one case study. Okay, so let's click over this. So first let's start with challenges on intranet. So intranet typically, especially in a larger corporation, is maintained by a whole bunch of webmasters. So each department has their own maintainer of an intranet website. So typically intranet websites, they are kind of outdated, tend to be outdated. And the quantity is kind of limited, and you need to have special tools and knowledge to update those pages. And so the content is static, so I call it like a one webmaster syndrome. So what it means, I'm as an employee, if I see that something is not correct, that needs to be updated. I'm usually too busy to find out, well, who is not a webmaster and send an email, please update that. So the result is the content usually gets stale very quickly. Then on distributed teams, nowadays, especially in high-tech companies with mergers, many times you have projects that are on several locations. So their question is, how do I get a virtual team to work together efficiently? So everybody else in sync, that everybody knows what's going on. Also, how to avoid duplication, so that libraries are not written on two places in the same company that have the same functionality. So typical answers are conference calls, occasional visits by the managers, exchanging engineers like for a month or so. Then to put like the market requirements document, design documents on a shared drive. And also like everybody's just using email, it's very common. And also instant messaging is getting more and more popular, also at corporations. Now, email is fine, but there are some limitations that you need to be aware of. So email usually gets lost after some time, or you delete it. And also search of an email is usually limited to the client side. It's great for discussion, but after 20 emails on a subject going back and forth, it's difficult to find, well, what's the consensus? Plus also email is just like, it's a posting, so you're posting one message by one message, and once it's posted, it's there. So there's no way to change it. So also, it's not hyperlinked, so you can't, of course you have these email folders and everybody's doing with mail filters, that's pretty good. But also like the whole content is not under version control. So, so you don't really see what the history is of the documents or attachments in the emails. Now, completely separate angle, content management systems. They are perfect tools, and there the focus is usually on a rigid structure. And this can be good and bad. For example, for a pharmaceutical company that is keeping track of patents, they need to have a very rigid structure to make sure that the content is structured, can be found, and is organized correctly. Then with CMS, usually the control over the content is more important than like free-form collaboration. Plus also, the content is typically arranged in a kind of a tree hierarchy, or just a simple table, like a database table rows. And the key point here is there is very limited cross-linking between the content. And also there is not so much support for unstructured data. So it doesn't really support like our brain works. We usually imagine some kind of a structure, but then usually there are always some kind of exceptions. And CMS usually can't handle that. Now, what is knowledge? And how can you foster knowledge in a company? KM, or knowledge management, it's all about management. But now, Van Krogh, who is from Switzerland, Nonaka and Ichio, they wrote a book called Enabling Knowledge Creation. Their assertion is that knowledge cannot be managed. They're saying knowledge only can be nurtured or enabled. And it's quite an interesting book. They identify 5 points, key points, how you can enable workers or employees, or how you can nurture the knowledge within a corporation or within an organization. So one is like to instill a knowledge vision. It's usually top down from upper management. Then manage conversation to be quite efficiently. Then to mobilize knowledge activists. So usually there are some experts in fields, but many times those experts, they have the knowledge in their head, or it's tribal knowledge that's very localized. So if you get to mobilize those experts, then that's a win. Then also to create the right context for knowledge creation. So with the right tools, the right procedures you put in place, you can foster the knowledge that way. And then also to globalize local knowledge. So the tribal knowledge that all these groups have, that you somehow globalize it and make it available to other groups within the organization. By the way, this presentation is available from the Twiki.org website. You can print it out, so you don't need to make so many notes. It's also available from Bill's website. Or actually, it will be available. We just started to put it up there.
Check with me tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what is Wiki? Well, first of all, who heard about Wiki or who heard about Wiki? Well, pretty much everybody. Well, maybe 80%. And who is already using some type of Wiki system? Maybe 20, 30%. Okay, so it's already kind of known. So Wiki or WikiWiki is a writable web. So key point is it's very quick to contribute content, like writing an email. And it's also as easy to use like a website, like reading a website. So a person called Ward Cunningham implemented this original system in the mid-90s. And he mainly used it to collaborate on software patterns. And plus also extreme programming. That's basically the birthplace from extreme programming. And the whole idea is somehow inspired by HyperCard on one side, but also on like Tim Berners-Lee's original vision of the World Wide Web. So the World Wide Web has a get function that everybody is using to read pages, but it also has a put function that very few, because of security deficiencies, is never enabled on websites. So the World Wide Web as we know it today is a read medium, so it is not what Tim Berners-Lee envisioned in the beginning. Okay, so the design principle, it's open, incremental, and organic. There's a word in Japanese, it's called wabi-sabi, and it means like the beauty of the imperfection. So if you have some Japanese garden or some kind of, how do we call that?
Kanji?
Ceramic stuff, yeah.
Oh, origami?
No, ceramics. So they're usually there's usually some part of imperfection put in by design. Okay, so here also it's the same idea in WikiWiki. So it's never something that is perfect or finished. It's always something organic that is evolving all the time. Now, there are some key features that a basic wiki system has. So basically, every page can be edited. So every page has an edit button. But just using a browser, you don't need any Dreamweaver or web authoring tool. Then the editing is usually form-based, HTML form-based, so it's not WYSIWYG editing. Then pages are served dynamically by a CGI program, typically, or web servlet. And pages are linked automatically based on WikiWord, so we will talk about this in a minute. And since it's form-based, not WYSIWYG, there's a simple markup language to make something bold or italic and so on. There are now over 100 wiki engines, so if you follow this link here, open it in a new window. So now we are jumping to the c2.com website, and if you look through here, there are lots of wiki engine in all different kind of languages. Now, what is Twiki? So if you notice the Twiki, there is a capital W, so it stands for T and Wiki. T stands for Take 5. That's a company that got acquired by Wind River. I started Twiki when I was working for Take 5. So T stands for Take 5. So Twiki is basically a wiki engine, but like Bill mentioned, it has outgrown its roots and it's now a platform for web applications. The mission is, so we are specifically targeting the corporate world, where we have certain requirements like audit trail and so on. And so we want to build or improve our tool that lets teams to work together much more efficiently. It's open source, GPL, and it's available for download at twiki.org. So what is Twiki? So it is a wiki in the original sense, but from the usage perspective, not the feature set, from the usage perspective, so it's a shared notebook for projects. So it's kind of a repository where you can upload your market requirements, documents, design spec, and so on. It's a place for scheduling, keeping track of project schedules, keeping track of meeting minutes. Then it's also a departmental tool, collaboration tool, like to document processes that you have, to drive project reviews, QA tracking, like test results tracking. For example, also goals and objectives. That's cascading down the chain. Then it's also an intranet publishing tool used by IT, HR, for example, also to publish ISO standards, quality standards, and so on. And then it's also a CMS. Some companies use it as a CMS, but there it's more focused on free-form collaboration. And one example application is a requirements capture application for some type of product that you have. Then it's used as a knowledge base. So a knowledge base typically has a problem-solution pair that you post, and typically also you can attach a patch. So Twiki actually started its life as a knowledge base for support, for customer support. It's a platform to create web-based applications, like news portals, inventory systems, issues tracking systems. There was once an article, I think, in Linux magazine, and the author was comparing the Twiki advanced features more like PHP. So it's moving into that direction that you can build web-based applications. So who is using Twiki? Lots of corporations like 3Com. You see, I won't read the list here. You can visit twiki.org website and then read some of the success stories. So these are success stories so it's not edited in any way. So it gives you also a good overview of how the tool is being used. Also in the academic world, it's used quite a lot. Let's just go in here and look at the Brandeis University website. Font is a little bit big. So basically everything here is driven by, not this page here, but almost everything is driven by Twiki. And you can see the speed is also quite fast. Also, in addition, many communities on the internet are using Twiki to collaborate on their thing they're doing, like IPCOP Firewall, Blue, Hurt, Fans website that Gary, that Grant Bowen is driving. BlueDonkey.org, that's a website that writes books and publishes books online. So we have today 28,000 downloads, about 10,000 folks are on the mailing list for update announcements, and there are well over 1,000 installations worldwide. The Twiki installation directory lists lots of installations, also for what is being used. Let's look at this later. Who is developing, creating Twiki? So we are 6 core team members who have CVS write access. As you see from the list, we are quite distributed. Maybe interesting to point out is that we never met in person, we never talked on the phone. So we are using Twiki as the main vehicle to get new features into Twiki. And also, a funny thing is, Andrea in Switzerland is usually used for a female name. So for the first 2 years, I assumed that Andrea is a female. But and so once on the Twiki.org website, I wrote a comment. She said, and then he corrected it to he. Okay. And so in addition, we have about 100 developers. So that's this link leads to a web notify page. That's like the subscription for developers. So these are folks who typically provide patches or bring a new idea that's being discussed on Twiki.org and then until it's implemented. Okay, so now look at the environment. So it's totally web based. Let's look at some of the elements. So we have a breadcrumb on top. So that list also grows. So usually, so it's fairly easy to go back, not where it came from, but back in the hierarchy where this page belongs to. We have so-called webs. A web is like a collaboration space within the system. So within a corporation, you might have one web for the QA team, one web for the tech hubs, and so on. Then we have changes. The changes link, I use it all the time. It shows like the most recent changes that have been done in this particular web. Search, of course. Then the Go box. That's a way to quickly jump to a page. So it's not a search. So if you know the page name, you just type it in and then you land up in that page. Then the whole system is template driven. Here we are looking at a screenshot Twiki.org website, the support web. So when somebody creates a new entry, it automatically gives you a question-answer pair. So the person posts the question, saves the page, and then so somebody else answers that. We have links. This signature here is done automatically. We will get to this in a minute. And then we have question mark links. We'll get to this in a minute. Just look here that we have two different types of links. We have forms. Form is a way to structure the content. So in a way you have unstructured content on top and some structure plus some categorization at the bottom. And then we have attachments. So like everybody knows email attachments. It's the same thing. Instead of happening like attaching a file to an email, you're attaching a file to a web page. Then of course the edit button here to edit a page. Then we have revisions here. So you will see, you can go back in time, see how the page looked in the past. You just can find out who changed what. Okay. Then the key point here, it's a very interactive environment. So you can add and also refactor content. So it's like a sharing knowledge thing. So if refactoring content, changing content, rearranging content, it's like on the other side an email. Email, you're just posting and that's it. And then you're posting again a new email and that's it. Here you're basically writing, the first person writes something up, the second person changes that existing content, and that is going on and on. We have notification of changes. So there's a email that you can subscribe to, also an RSS feed. It's a way to keep everybody in sync, and it's also a way for more senior, for example, if you use it as a knowledge base, the more senior folks can check if the content that has been contributed is accurate, and it can be fixed on the spot. Now let's look at the key point of this wiki system, which is automatic linking. So it's very easy to create hyperlinked pages within a wiki system, and that's based on these wiki words. what it is, wiki word itself is also a wiki word. So it means it's uppercase, lowercase, and uppercase pattern. And they can repeat. So it's basically capitalized words run together. Now let's say I know there in the system we have a page called Internet Tools. So I added this page and add this bullet here. For more information, see Internet Tools. When I save the page, I will see also the bullet, and the link is done for me automatically. I don't need to worry about creating links. I only need to remember to give page names wiki names.
And that's within your particular web. So,
and that is correct, yes.
But not globally at all.
Right. So that's namespace. The namespace is for the current web. There's also a way to link to a web that's to a different web. Okay, then now as important is how to create a new page. And so it's the same thing. Basically, you think of a new name, page name that doesn't exist yet in the system. So you type in, for example, for more information, see Internet Services, and you save the page. What you see then is a question mark with a link. That's an indication that the system is telling you that this page does not exist yet. And it invites you to create it by clicking on the question mark link. And then once you've done that, you go to the originating page, then you see it as a link. So now let's look at that. So I just click on that link. So now I edit this page here. And you see this is the edit form here, it's form-based. Now let's create a brand new page. You see I took out the spaces between the brand new and page. I do a preview and I do a save. So now you see there's a question mark. Now I click on the question mark and here we go. And I save the page, or preview and save the page. And now you see we are in the sandbox in Twiki, and we just created a page called brand new page. If I go back in the breadcrumb here to the parent, you see that now this is no more a question mark, page is there. Okay, so that takes a little bit time to get used to this way of creating a new page, but once you get it, it's fairly quickly. Okay, then let's go back, continue with the presentation. Now, version control, I briefly mentioned it. So everything...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to explain to us why that question mark didn't go away in your presentation? Because you changed something, you made that page.
In the presentation here...
Right, next page.
So this page here.
That one right there, right.
This is only a fake question mark.
Oh. Just in case anyone wanted to know.
Yeah. Okay. So version control, like all the content is under version control. So if you attach, well, first of all, the page content itself. So you see that currently we're looking at revision 1.6 on this document, on this page. At what time it was done, who made that change. And here you can go back in time. It only shows the last 3 revisions. If you click on more, you can go back to the first revision. Then also all file attachments are under revision control. So if you click on action, you will see the list of all versions of GNU patch in case there's more than one version. The version control is something very important for corporations, so it leaves a complete audit trail for everything that you do in the system. Then there's also access control. So you can define a group. There's one page called Twiki groups that lists all groups that are defined in the system. And one example, the Twiki admin group page has mainly two important lines or bullets. One is a set group that defines who the members are of the group. And then set allow topic change that is telling you, you're defining who is allowed to make changes to the page. In other words, who is allowed to invite other folks. In this example here, the page name is Twiki admin group, and you're saying it's a Twiki admin group that can invite other people. That means everybody in this list can invite other folks. Then the second step is that you impose some kind of access restriction based on those groups. And you can do that on a per page level or also on a web level. Important to consider is that usually soft security works. What I mean by soft security is just rely on the version control of the system. There are only a few cases where you actually do need version control, access restrictions. Those cases are, for example, engineering content that needs to be shielded from the sales front. But basically, if a person can look at the content, that person should be able to change the content. That sounds like an invitation for chaos. It's kind of strange that that you have an open system like this, but in reality it works very well. It works very well in the corporation, within in an intranet. There's enough peer pressure to post only content that makes sense. And if somebody posts content that doesn't make sense, well, there's an edit button. Anybody can fix it on the spot. Right? At an example at Twiki.org, we have several thousand page changes per month, and we have very few problems. So it happens maybe once every 2 months or so that somebody deletes the page content, basically just deletes the content and saves it, but it's not gone. It's just like one version back, and I as the administrator can roll back a version and then everything is fixed. So the Twiki.org website, the Twiki on Twiki.org and other public websites, they're usually world writable, and it works well. So it must work on the internet. Okay, preferences. So the system has 3 levels of preferences: site level, on the web level, and user level. Limitations of Twiki. So it's purely web-based. That means, so with this HTML form, it's not really, you can't really do big edits with an HTML editor. I mean, with a text box. So they're usually quite primitive. Some browsers allow you to launch an editor, your preferred editor. They're usually text-based browsers. There's also a plugin on the Twiki.org website that I think it's called Power Edit plugin. That is basically a Java applet that's an HTML WYSIWYG type editor. I haven't tried it out. So editing is not WYSIWYG. Nevertheless, it's fairly easy to create good-looking text. There is a markup that you need to learn. It doesn't take too much time to learn that. So, for example, you type make text bold in asterisks and fixed, which is in the equal signs. And if you look at the page, if you save the page, you will see it in bold and fixed font. And then there is another syntax to make bullets, headings, and tables, and so on. So resources to learn. On the Twiki installation, you have a welcome guest page that goes through these most important steps. I usually point folks first to there. One of the steps is to register. It's also on the welcome guest page. So you need to set up your own account. And then it's also you can follow the tutorial that takes maybe 20 minutes to go through.
Why don't you mention too, what information is really required to register? You don't need to know their wife's name or their mother's maiden name or anything like that.
So the registration page can be customized. We are looking now at on the Twiki.org website So it's this form here. So what is actually required is, the only thing that is really required is email address and your wiki. And all the other one, well, and plus also password if you're if you let the system manage passwords. In many corporate environments, you want to authenticate against this database exists so that users don't need to track more than one password. So that's a web server setup question. And Twiki supports both, like internal keeping track of user account with passwords or over some external means like NIS.
Or LDAP.
Or
LDAP.
Or LDAP, yeah. Okay. Now let's look at some advanced features. So we have skins, with variables, forms, formatted search, plugins with an API. Skins basically change the look and feel of a page, but the page content itself doesn't change. So that's basically meant as a separation of presentation and content. So typically in a corporate environment, you want to create a skin that mimics your own intranet, so that employees feel at home immediately. The default Twiki skin or template is kind of a bare bone, very functional look. It's nothing fancy. So usually corporations to create their own skin. So there are many skins for download. I think latest count is about 15. So you can either download, install a skin, or create your own skin. Then we have variables. Variables are something like system variables in Windows or Unix. For example, %red % will start the text to appear in red. Then there are variables that require some parameters that will give you the system time in a certain format, and there are plenty of variables to choose from. There are also variables that are preferences variables. Again, it's site level that can be overloaded by web level, which can be overloaded by user level. You also can customize the variables or also create additional variables, like preferences variables. Then one particular type of variable is the server-side include, it's a standard server feature. Then mostly interesting to build web applications are Twiki forms. So think of Twiki forms kind of a database, but it's not like a regular database with relational database with tables and so on. So it's basically everything you're defining as a Twiki page. So the first step is you're defining a topic or a web page, in other words, that defines the form, how a form should look like. So here on this, you have a pick list, you have checkboxes, you could have edit fields and so on. So at first you're defining what kind of form you have. Second step is that then once you have it defined, you're attaching a form to a page. Doing so, that's in database speak, it's like a page with a form attached to it. It's like a table row in a relational database. And the key point here is that if you look at a page, you will see at the bottom just the form that you have been defined with these values. But when you edit the page, on top you will have this big edit box that we have seen just before, and at the bottom you have this the form here, the web form in edit mode. Okay, so that's a way to give structure to unstructured data. Then the counterpart to this is formatted search. So now we want to do some kind of reporting. For this we have another variable called %search that accepts many different parameters. And with this you can do all kind of reporting. Now let's look at an example. Meeting minutes application. So That's a group has weekly meetings. We have a system here where we have a template, just like a template that should be used for each meeting minute to have a common look. Also, we've already filled in the default attendees. Then we have here a create button. So now I'm creating a new meeting minute. So it will use this form, this template. My name, Grant Bowman or Grant Bow? Bow at Twiki, okay. So then basically just write your meeting minutes here and preview the changes and save the changes, and you're basically done. So if I go back to the meeting minutes index page, you see now we have 2 bullets instead of 1. This list here is a percent search. It is an embedded search that formats the page output as a bullet. Another example is a change request. So the meeting minutes application is something very bare bone, very simple. Let's look at a little bit more advanced. Here we have a change request application. Same idea, but here we have a table instead of bullets. So each table row basically represents some data from a page, from a Twiki page. So requested by, assigned to, priority. So if I go into this change request here, you see that we have here on top the free-form text. At the bottom we have this classification. So if I edit the page here and assigned to, oops, if I change something, change priority here. So you've seen now on top the free-form data and at the bottom the form. If I go back to the change request index page, you see that change request 1001 is now assigned to me. Okay, then we have a plugin API. So plugins basically enhance the functionality of Twiki. One example is a spreadsheet plugin. So this syntax here, that's regular Twiki syntax, how to create a table. Just with these pipe symbols or vertical bars, you create a table. If you put it in asterisk, it will consider this as a table heading, right? That's standard Twiki feature. What you see here is a formula. This formula is now provided by this plugin. So this is live data, so this number here should be correct if there's no bug in the spreadsheet plugin. Okay, so there's well actually let's go back quickly. So we have a growing repository of plugins. Let's quickly have a look. I think there are over 70 at this moment here. Let's see, this link here, that's add-ons. This link here goes into the plugins. And there are lots of interesting plugins. One favorite that we use at work is Action Track plugin that keeps bugging people with email if they need to follow up on something until it's closed. So there are lots of plugins. For example, chart plugin let you visualize table data, make nice charts, and so on and so on. Then, so plugins, so we have an API. Perl, Twiki itself is written in Perl, so the plugins are typically written also in Perl. Theoretically, it would be possible to write in a different language if you write a wrapper around Perl, or your language into Perl. And how it works, so we have a certain number of callbacks that a plugin can provide. For example, at the save time, at the point when you save the page, there's a callback, so that the plugin could do some action at the time when the page is saved. Plus the other way around too, so there are lots of functions that a plugin can use, functionality from Twiki itself. Okay, now let's look at some more advanced features, web applications. So the basic feature set, what we have seen so far, including advanced features, can be used to write web applications. One example is the Twiki installation directory, which folks who are installing Twiki voluntarily, they sometimes list their installation on this directory. Another example is the workflow system to keep track of features and bugs. So if you have more advanced requirements, then you can write your own plugin or use one of these, download and install one of the existing plugins.
You're using one of the plugins right now, right?
I'm using one of the plugins right now, which is it's called the slideshow plugin. Okay. So if I go here, that's how the page looks like. It's a regular Twiki page. If we scroll down here,
Top.
where are we? Web applications.
It's at the top, I think, is the start presentation.
Web applications, so here we are. Okay. So if you edit the page, you see it's just a simple Twiki markup, so I could change the presentation on the fly here.
You wouldn't do that to me, would you?
Okay, so the Twiki installation page is, I would like to point out, so let's open it. So it uses just a basic feature set like Twiki forms, Twiki variables, and formatted search. And some plugin magic like the spreadsheet plugin. So we have here the list of installations. Each entry is basically one page in Twiki. So if you look at one entry, it's basically empty content, page content, it's only form content, right? And the form content is just pulled out and displayed on this page here. Now you can, at the bottom, you have some statistics that's provided by the spreadsheet plugin. Like how many academic installations we have, or in an academic environment, corporate environment, and so on. Now, you can do some filtering. So you can say, show me all corporate installations that are used, that are firewalled. I have here a little bit of big font because of the presentation. Usually it fits on one page. So now I run the query, and now I see just the corporate installations. So that's one example. So the form up, the filter up here, that's normal HTML. So usually content creators are not using HTML for content, just this wiki markup. But for building these web applications, you just need to do some gluing with HTML. So this filter here is a regular HTML form. Okay. Then another example is feature tracking. So at twiki.org we eat our own dog food. So somebody brings a brainstorming idea that gets discussed, gets promoted into under construction. Then at some point it's done. Say somebody brings an enhancement request, or so there's some kind of workflow. Let's go into look into an enhancement request. So these are now, that's an index page that lists all enhancement requests that have been posted in Twiki, so it's fairly extensive. And the whole idea is here that anybody can start a new wiki work. That probably doesn't make sense to create a page like this, but just give you the idea. So I could create this page here. I basically get an empty page here. I could type my enhancement request. The form is already filled out for me. I don't need to change anything here. I save it, and then if I go back to this page here, it will be listed. Now, let's see. Let's assume that this. I'm just picking the first one. Let's assume that this enhancement request, I'm going to work on that. Then what I would do, I would go to this page, write some blurb that I'm going to work on this, or some more details. I can drop in my signature, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to work on this. So it's under construction. So I just change the status here, preview save the page. I will do it now. So if I go back, then you will see that it disappears from this list here, and it actually would appear in the to-do list page. Okay, so that way you can define just a very simple way of workflow. So now initial deployment. So first of all, you need to install Twiki on a web server. Here, it is a little bit tricky, so depending on who you ask, it's like a piece of cake or impossible. So some web server administration skills are assumed. Quite important is to plan the whole rollout and content. Usually it's better to attack the problem from like a painkiller approach, not the vitamins approach. Anybody heard those terms? A painkiller is something that I really have to have fixed. I can't live, I really need to do something. A vitamin is something that keeps you healthy, but it's nice to have, but I could live without it. So for initial deployment, just pick something that is bugging people. So that's a better way to get a successful initial deployment. So build the initial structure, like page content, forms, in case you have some workflow. Populate initial content. Don't do it yourself. Invite some other folks that would like to help out in this field. Then do the initial rollout in a smaller group. Don't do like a big bang release. Then very important, train and coach the users. Just before the meeting, I got a comment that it is good to just print out some text, this welcome page and text formatting page, and hand it out to the folks. But very important is coaching the users. So because efficient collaboration needs to be done in the right way, and it takes some time until folks get that idea. Also, do not underestimate the inertia, like the habits that folks have, especially inertia of using email. So it just takes time to move, to write less email and move more content into a wiki system. And also don't underestimate the time it takes. For example, at Wind River, the initial deployment, initial deployment was before that initial deployment, or I would say that the real deployment was in a larger group, but before that it took maybe half a year where almost nothing happened. And that's quite typical for a corporate environment. So from Twiki downloads, I typically don't hear much for a long time, or maybe in the support web initially to get stuff installed, and then maybe a couple months just nothing happens, and suddenly there's a whole bunch of stuff going on.
Peter?
Yep.
Question, what's the typical installation time for someone who's,
who knows web server and CGI environment could be an hour. So it's not, in case you know the environment, it's maybe a question of an hour. But then that's only to get the engine installed, and including all documentation that will be installed also. But then you also need to think about what kind of plugins you want. So you browse the plugins list and decide maybe I need the spreadsheet plugin, install that. So plus also this the initial rollout. I mean the planning and building the initial structure can take a couple days, a week, 2 weeks. Just totally depends. Pardon me?
One web or multiple webs or?
Right, yeah. So here the Lego box, what I mean with this, so you won't get like a car where you put in the key and drive out of the lot. Some people use it that way. It's possible, certainly, but usually it pays off to give some initial thought of how you want to structure the content, how you want folks to use it. Any other question? Yeah.
You mentioned some inertia on people using email. Is there a plugin or other scripts that make it easy to transition by, for example, using the wiki system as an automatic archive to email lists?
The question was, I will repeat the question. So the question was if there's a way to overcome the inertia of email, like for example, automatically feeding email into wiki system. There's actually an add-on on the Twiki.org website that does that. So there's Twiki has plugins. We talked about plugins, but it also has add-ons. Add-ons are like standalone scripts that add some additional functionality.
I was thinking particularly where the email lists are already being archived. So you take a small step of simply moving the archives from whatever web archive you have into the wiki system.
For existing archived stuff, I'm not sure how if that pays off this extra work. What I would recommend in this case.
I'm not talking about moving the existing archives. I'm just talking about moving where the archiving is being done, so that after such and such a date, if they want to see the archives, they go to the wiki.
Right. Well, actually, at work, at my daytime job, we're still using mailing lists. Okay, so there's a place for both. So the mailing list is usually something for like quick announcements, and Twiki is more used for some longer-term content that should evolve over time. So personally, I'm not convinced that it makes sense to move a mailing list into Twiki. But what does make sense is instead of one engineering manager, the product marketing manager sends a market requirements document to the engineering manager, please review, and then send it to the QA manager for review and so on. So this kind of email traffic is better done in Twiki.
A related question. In classic wikis, there's the notion of this cycle of motion on a given page between document mode and thread mode, and then refactoring back to document. Do you have anything that supports that in a more structured fashion than just the individual personal discipline of the discipline?
Right. Okay. So the question was, in the original wiki, there is a notion of document mode and thread mode of a page content, and how to move between those two modes. Now, first of all, what it is, the document mode is where somebody starts with a page, and the next person just refactors the whole page, just inserts new phrases into the existing content. So that means that there's one monolithic document that changes over time, like the whole document changes. Thread mode is when the first person posts something, a second person adds at the bottom of the page, and so on. So both modes, there are places for both modes. There is actually the whole wiki system, or also Twiki, is totally free, so you can do either way. For the thread mode, there's some support. So there's a plugin called comment plugin, where you have like a small edit field visible at the bottom of the page, and you just add content and hit submit, so you don't need to go through the edit preview save cycle. So it's easier to have this threaded mode where you just add content. Yep.
Is there like an interactive installation builder or way of something like that to customize it later on if you want to change?
A wizard.
Yeah, wizard. Is there something like that to help you? You know, you haven't shown us really, I don't think, how to actually set it up. Or
You mean like, you're talking about the Twiki installation wizard to install Twiki itself? Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually on the to-do list. So the current installation is a manual process. We have extensive documentation how to install it in different ways, but it's a manual process. And so there's some folks work currently on an installer to automate that. Okay, yeah.
Just a comment on that. If someone has Debian, it's very simple. You just do apt-get install Twiki and it'll take care of everything. It has configuration. It has like a mini wizard. So if you have Debian, I know that this is quite easy. I'm not sure about it.
Yeah, so I repeat the command. So there is a Debian install that automatically installs Twiki. It'll make a default install with everything on the right place. Okay, let me continue here and let's get some more questions at the end. Or if you have questions related to the page, please ask them. Okay, so now some collaboration issues that you need to be aware of. So there's a don't touch syndrome. So pages look like a proper website, and in a way it is. And so, like if John Smith changed that page, so it's visible in the signature, then it's like, well, should I change that page or not? Then also related, so there's like the shared knowledge versus ownership. So I do not want to edit someone else's page. So here, quite important is this wiki culture. So it's a cultural thing. So basically, nobody owns a page, and so and any change can be built upon. So it takes some time to get used to this type of working together. And so specifically, like the first person who creates a page is not the owner. Well, now, of course, sometimes if you have some processes, like ISO processes, documentation, you don't want that anyone just changes their page. There it makes sense either to impose access restriction or just make a command, don't edit this page. Then there's the no control syndrome. That's mainly by management, so this leads to chaos. And so it's a typical nightmare of the database administrator. The database administrator's world is control and access control. And also by upper management, it can be perceived as disruptive. And so here again, so with the soft security and this audit trail and the peer pressure, especially with the peer pressure, it usually works very well. Then also effort, so it takes too much time to contribute. But at the end, it saves time by doing less email, by reading less emails, you will receive less emails, and by finding critical information quicker. In a good way, so if you learn some new technology on XML or whatever new technology, you can share what you learn by just creating a page. Then this Twiki syntax, so it's yet another language to learn. So what I usually answer here, so just consider Twiki like an email when you compose or when you change a page. So just do it. So in other words, only add formatting where needed. So the first point is get the content up, and the second word is the look and feel. And there are help pages, so initially you don't really need to know how to make a heading, but if you want to know that, there's a help page. Then the email habit, of course, I prefer email, but email doesn't scale, we talked about that before. But there's one implication, network infrastructure. You need to be online, okay? So if a salesperson is not connected, that person can't get at the content. There is actually a plugin that allows you to create like a static HTML version of a whole set of pages. So that way you could support these offline users, but not in a read-write mode. So now let's look at the case study at Wind River. So this initial deployment, so it was installed, like I mentioned before, maybe a half year before that initial deployment that I'm listing here. But the actual deployment started here in 2000 when Wind River started with a larger software project that had 100 engineers located in 7 different locations in Europe and the States. Wind River is a company that makes embedded systems and tools. Had a couple of companies, acquired a couple of companies, and with that engineering force they've been in various locations. So we have evaluated 2 web-based products to keep track of all these project-related stuff like schedules, milestones, meeting minutes, code reviews, objectives, and so on. So we evaluated eRoom and Twiki. The eRoom was in use by the company called ISI that Wind River acquired. It was a merger of the same size, ISI and Wind River at that time. And Twiki was used by Take5. And so we decided for Twiki mainly because it was more flexible. You could do more things your way than eRoom, although eRoom looks much nicer out of the box and has more like already set applications built into it. So we spent some time to compile the requirements with the key stakeholders, so all the managers of this big software project, and then we spent time to build the initial structure. One requirement was, for example, to show on one page all dependencies between all these different sub-projects. So it's basically just a report that you compile all the interdependencies from these different sub-projects. Then we gave virtual trainings for each office on collaboration. There I focus more on the pros and cons of email. It's a lot about what we hear tonight, and it's not so much the actual the syntax, how to make something bold. Those trainings I gave with just using NetMeeting. I asked remote sites to gather in a conference room, like in Europe, and just made a NetMeeting session and with a presentation similar to this. And then, very important, just coaching the employees. So I monitored, plus another person also monitored the content that the engineers were putting in, then just sending hints, email hints. Hey, listen, there's an application where you can keep track of meeting minutes, or hey, you can do this way. Ah, okay. So that usually pays off. So then after this, the first group was using quite a lot, and then other parts at Wind River have been seeing how that it was something useful. Then also there was a big push in the Twiki usage when the corporate council, that's like a cross-department team, was using it to document all their initiatives and findings and metrics. And then we also created several skins in the Wind River intranet look. And so now we have 1,200 registered users, so almost the whole company. Actually, it's with layoffs, it's more than the company. So Wind River scaled down from 2,000 employees to 1,000 now. So a total of 1,200 folks, including those who left the company.
That brings up an interesting point. Where's the discipline for the registered users who are no longer with us?
Right, so that's also like a question how to manage content in Twiki. So usually content is managed by those local groups, but some part needs to be managed centrally. That's like user management. So what we do is doing folks who are leaving the company, we still leave the page, but just the user's homepage, but just delete all the content from it and made a note, left company in June or whatever, and if the person sent out a goodbye email with contact information, we put that email address also in there. And so we leave the page there because that person might have contributed some content. So if you have seen before in the presentation, typically postings are signed. So and your signature points back to your home page. So if I would remove the user's home page, those signatures would be broken links or question mark links. Okay. I'm losing my voice, sorry. But we are almost finished. So Twiki is basically a powerful platform to build web-based applications. Typically used for free-form content, but also free-form content with some structure. You can add structure when needed. So it's an easy and quick tool to share knowledge online. But careful coaching is needed. You have a small start typically, but after that you will have a viral growth, so after people get it. And so it's a platform to build web-based applications efficiently. Okay, so that's all I have, so please, questions? Yep.
Can you either show us or talk a little bit about how webs are created and how they're interrelated?
Okay, so the question is how to create a new web.
So the web is just a different namespace for the wiki, is that?
Right. So the like the original wiki only has one namespace. So if you type in meeting minutes, it's unique. It's only one page that has that name. Twiki is targeting like the corporate world, where also large organizations. So with these different webs, you have a namespace with different namespaces. So you can have a page that's called meeting minutes in the QA web, and one that's called meeting minutes in the support web, support group web.
You can't just sort of think of it like the server is a multi-hosting domain server, and each domain is its own web.
Right.
So is that broader than just Twiki? Are there other wikis doing webs now, or is that unique to Twiki?
I believe it's, but I might be wrong. So also important is to link between other webs. So if I go, let me go out of the presentation now.
You might also point out one of the ways here, we just clicked on there, there's this little sandbox, which is kind of like a practice area. Whatever you do over there doesn't cause any long-term effects.
Right, exactly. That's a good point, the sandbox. So at twiki.org we have the sandbox, but also if you install Twiki on your site, you also will have a sandbox web. And that's a good place to play around. So now let's go to the web changes link here. And you see here, changed by myself. So I go to this brand new page, and to answer the question about like cross-linking. So let's say, well, one cross-link already we have in here. So if you look at the page here, the signature is already here. My signature lives, my home page lives in the main web. So if I edit the page, you see here this main dot prefix. That's basically a way how to do cross-linking between pages. Yep.
To answer his question, I have seen people do the equivalent of multi-webs by providing multiple URLs before the query. So on a given server, they might provide some structured prefix before the actual CPI hit.
Okay.
Wiki.pearl or whatever. That's one way to create multiple web pages.
Okay, so that you basically have multiple instances of wikis?
Or it just parses the URL before the query, one level up, and figure out which one.
Okay.
And the second question is, are the webs flat, or are they hierarchically structured themselves?
Okay, the easy answer is that they're flat, actually by design, because you want to have one namespace. If you type meeting minutes here, you want to always to end up on that page. Now,
No, I mean the namespace of the webs.
of the webs. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. So is the namespace of the webs flat? And the answer is yes. So you do not have a hierarchy between the webs. At Windows we have like 100 webs, and we've had no need so far to have it hierarchical. What we did, like with 100 webs, it's getting kind of long at at the home page to list all these 100 webs. So what we are currently doing is restructure this big table that's flat that lists all webs. We are restructuring, just listing it as bullets, and have the bullet indented, and the bullet reflects the org chart of the company. So that.
But that's an explicitly imposed structure.
Exactly.
Not extracted from the web names themselves.
That's correct. Yeah. That's only like a visual fix for this, like showing it as a structure where in reality it's flat. Then within, if I make here a little wider. So if you're within a web, so the namespace is flat for all pages or topics, and but here we have this breadcrumb. So I started this internet services page. From there I started a brand new page. If I edit this page and create a new page, then this breadcrumb here will grow. So there's this parenting relationship. Yeah, Grant?
Doesn't Mega Twiki have hierarchical webs?
Right, so there is a derivative or fork of Twiki. It's called Mega Twiki. That's done by Thomas Weigert. I think he's Motorola. And they actually made or extended Twiki to support hierarchical webs, a hierarchical web structure.
How would you make a link to something entirely off that server? Just a standard HTTP?
Right. So if I go here,
You're going to want
So
two
just-
doubles.
oops, 2 slashes probably.
Yeah.
So just type in the URL, it links for you automatically, right?
Okay.
So you end up at Google. You also can,
I do the Ahref.
there is equivalent to Ahref. There's like, it's this syntax here.
Okay.
Whoops. So you can give it another name. Maybe I would like to quickly show how to link, or actually, no, let's see that's fine. Let's look at this. So it looks like this. Now, the question, actually, I didn't answer a question of a previous question, how to create a new web. So this, on most sites, this is access restricted. Only administrators can create new webs, but you can configure that. So I just call it new web. Or actually, let me first discuss how to jump to a page. I can just type in here web notify. I know that this page exists in the sandbox web, and all of those folks will be bugged by email if something changes. Okay. Then I can go to the CodeF web notify, just with a dot. Then I jump to a different web, to a page in a different web. Now I can jump to CodeF just with a dot. I will jump to the web of that name. To the home of that web, to the home of that CodeF web. Now I want to create a new web, so it's similar to creating a new page. So let's talk about food. Create a web about food, or actually I prefer sushi. So it's just type sushi and a dot, and it says that this web does not exist. And so now I just create this new web here. I can say I want to have it the default the web structure or the page content based on the default web or some other existing web. So I'll give it some description and just create a web, and that's it.
Is that copying or inheriting based on web?
That is copying content.
No spams getting put in automatically?
We hadn't had any automatic updates of spam problems like this.
No, I mean the word no spam in the email address.
Okay. I misunderstood, yeah. No, 2, 5. So this is like a spam padding because we had some harvesting problem in the past. So if you look here in edit mode, there's no spam padding, and that's Twiki puts it in. That's one preference setting that you can control. Yeah, Grant?
One more question. From a knowledge management perspective, can you describe the ref by and how it's useful?
Okay. So the question, what the ref by means, and mainly from knowledge management perspective. Ref by means like referred by. So if I click on this page, on this link here, I will find out what other pages point to this page here. So backlinks. And that's, if you are the author or working on some content, then it's also interesting to find out what other folds point or pages point to your page. So that's, for this, it's
useful during the move of a page too.
Right, so there is, if I go to the, let's show that quickly, how to do moves or renames. So I go to the brand new page here that we just created. I go to the more, and here I can rename the page. Rename. So I just call it now brand new page renamed, and it already lists all the pages that like the backlinks, and I can selectively say to fix those links or not.
When you don't fix them, they still point on the right page afterwards?
Can you say that, please?
If you don't fix them, they still point on the right page?
No, if you don't fix, for example, if I take out this here and I rename the page, then on this originating page here, after the rename, you will have a question mark.
Okay. How is that generally stored on the server? Is this just pages, kind of like the CVS repository?
Okay, so how the content is stored on the server? Because the Twiki has a storage backend. It's like a plugable storage backend, and currently there are 2 storage backends. Both are file-based. One is just a flat file system. So basically each web is a directory on the server, and then each page has then this page data, which is a text file plus one history file. It's an RCS history file, so it's a .v file. And so one storage backend uses the native RCS, so calls the external RCS commands, and then the other storage backend does this RCS in parallel. So there are some talks about creating a database backend. Yep.
Is there something equivalent to a site map? Would there be like an index or some graphical representation of all the stuff you have linked together?
Right.
To even to denote some of the question mark pages maybe?
Right. So the question is if there's some way of a sitemap where you see like a map, graphical map of all the pages with the relation. There are several ways that does that. So Twiki out of the box does not support that. So the only thing that you see in Twiki out of the box is this index, which shows you just a flat list of all pages in the current web. There is an add-on called, what's the name again? WebDot. I forgot the name. So there's one plugin that uses another GPL software that basically creates a nice graphic like with circles and arrows between circles. So each circle is one page name, and it shows that structure. I forgot the
Touch
name.
graph, right? Touch graph?
Touch graph, yeah, I think that's
You
it.
may be off someplace.
There's another one I've seen in
Interesting.
other wikis that shows you all of the pages that point to this one within a certain number of hops.
Uh-huh.
So it goes out a certain
Right.
connectivity radius around.
Okay, yeah. There's also one plugin, it's called Tree plugin, that basically shows, instead of like index a flat list, it shows you the page structure with the parenting relationship. Grant, do you know, is the GNU fans, does it have the plugin installed?
I don't think so.
So on the Twiki.org website, I didn't install it. So there's a, maybe we can quickly go to the plugins web. So it's not installed, but I believe there is just a sample page. And into the plugins. Tree plugin.
As you said, this is open source and still developing, and you'd invite people to help you on that.
Yep.
They had something they wanted.
What we, like, since we introduced the plugin API, so it's actually nice decoupling from the core code, so we got a big boost, so now folks are able to create extensions to Twiki without waiting for us to put it into the core code.
We write the
Benefits of open source.
C sample image, okay.
And you haven't been sued by SCO?
No, I haven't seen it.
It's like long enough to get around everyone.
So there's several ways, yeah.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question about portability of the content. So last company, current company I was at, one of the big concerns I had in implementing a particular wiki, and I'm kind of curious just about what the state of the art is with wikis in general with this, because we're looking at a particular wiki and implementing it, and there's a considerable risk in implementing it, using it for a year, and then having it go away or make a left turn from where it was useful for us, and then being stuck having to manually transfer our data.
Right.
Any effort going on in XML kind of core content transfer?
Right. So on the c2.com, so in the original wiki, there was some discussion about like a unified or standard way of wiki exchange, but I don't believe that it is here yet. There is related to this, there is a standard to make cross links between wikis. Just for links, but not for the data. Now for the data, for Twiki's user base, I'm not too much concerned about this, like creating this, because Twiki is almost the only one that is specifically focusing on the corporate market. So I'm not too much concerned of moving data between, but we do actually have lots of questions like this. So how do I move use mod wiki content into Twiki, or Dolphin wiki to content into Twiki, and so on. And so there is also on the plugins web, there is one specific translator. I think one is for the Dolphin wiki. So basically, it's like a one-time transfer or conversion of the page data. It's usually a question of translating the syntax from one wiki into another. So with a little kernel knowledge, it's fairly easy to do that.
Pulling in HTML pages? Is there one for pulling HTML pages in?
Well, the question is there one for pulling HTML pages in? There is no plugin to pull that content in. However, you could paste HTML content directly into a wiki page. So
I'm curious, Wind River, how many people still just grab the HTML code and put it into?
Actually, very little. Usually, like from the static internet, Wind River is still using a lot of static internets. So it's basically leaving, some content is in the static internet, some content is in Twiki, and there's a lot of cross-linking. But there's very little like copy and pasting in between.
There's one up on the screen right now, fourth from the top, that says generic wiki to Twiki.
Yep, okay. So the Dolphin, that's specific for the Dolphin wiki. And you're right, could you point this out? So somebody contributed this generic one here. And with some configuration and a little bit programming, you can tweak it to support another wiki. Okay, any other questions?
Peter, thank you very much.
Forth and coming to see us, so we'd like to give you that.
Oh, thank you.
Minor remembrance of tonight's event. I appreciate you. I'd like to also comment that in this case, not in every case, in this case, the Internet Developer Group is taking its own medicine, and we have installed a Twiki. So you can go, and if you want to know where it is, there was an agenda handout back there that happens to have the URL on it. But you go to www.internetdeveloper.org/Twiki/ the last / is very significant, and you will be put into the top page of the Internet Developer Twiki, and there will be areas that are open, and we will also be responsive to people who would come to us and say, we'd like you to support us in some closed collaboration group that we can set up. So we might have to prove how Twiki works in the non-enterprise environment, but we'll do our best to support that. And in fact, that's where this presentation went. I can tell you this is the first instance of where the presentation got into the archives ahead of being given at the meeting. So we'll try. I haven't got all the pictures there yet, but I'll get those over before tomorrow. If you need eNet help, if you need email help on using the Twiki, you can mail to twiki@internetdeveloper.org, and someone will get back to you within about 24 hours, I would guess, and try and facilitate whatever you're doing. We don't do this for everything, but we're going to do it this time. Are there any projects that anyone wants to announce? Help anyone wants or anything like that? Okay. We're continuing to pursue the video. We have installed a Helix real-time real video server and at AboveNet, or MFN net now. So there's ample bandwidth going out, and in fact that's where Peter will be in all his presentation skills. Within about a couple of days, I'd say I'll be able to convert it over and get a file up there. And we've been able to do the last couple of presentations like that. And it's very interesting. We do get a fair amount of people coming down and looking who are not able to get to the meeting on the evening it's given. If there's no other subjects, thank you very much for coming. We'll look forward to seeing you next month. Oh, I want to tell you one thing about next month's meeting. Next month's meeting should be very interesting. A young lady is coming from IBM. She is, Catlin is one of 5 people who went to see Gerstner, who was the CEO at the time, about why IBM should look at Linux. And she will be coming down and answering the question that everyone's been asking me, which is how do you cost justify open source GPL operating system like Linux versus a proprietary model? And she says she has a better presentation than I saw her do. And when I saw her 2 years ago, she was pretty good. So we'll see. Look forward to seeing you all next month.